And now, our feature presentation.
To infinity and beyond!
My name's Bond. James Bond.
That'll do, Piggy.
Bad boys, what you gonna do?
Sorry with the box. What was in the box?
Ew! Get off of me! Ugh, I'm ill.
A lot of people go to college for 7 years.
I know. They're called doctors.
Houston, we have a problem.
Hello. Let's switch this over. Welcome in, everybody, to 52/1995, your extra credit edition, coming to you live here on Wednesday to talk about a few movies that I kind of assigned for extra credit, and whether or not you watch them or knew somebody that watched them or have watched them in the past. Love for you to come in and talk to me and talk to me in the chat and see what you think. But welcome in to 52/1995, the live movie conversation podcast where we're talking about movies from the year 1995. I am your host, Cody. Don't be confused by my name, Chet, or get off the pot. Chet being a character from one of the movies that we're going to be discussing today. So I am your host, Cody. If this is your first time joining us, this is not typically how we do things here, but welcome in. We're happy for you to join us today. Just to give you a little bit of a heads up, typically we talk about 52 movies from the year 1995. From, we do it every year, but every month we have a couple movies that don't quite make that cut. There's always those movies out there that are good or we're super nostalgic for, but they're not as important as probably we would like them to be. I know once we get into some of the more like kids movies, I not to spoil next month's extra credit, but those are going to be more kids movies. There might be a little bit more nostalgia and a little bit more understanding about why they didn't quite make the cut, but we want to give them their due anyway. And so I cram them all into one podcast, and we do about 4 to 5 movies every month at the end of the month and talk about them. And this month is no different. We're talking about a topic, indie darlings, which means that all of the movies that we're talking about this month are all small independent movies that made a splash this year, or kind of made a splash and maybe made a splash later down the road. So we can go ahead and get into our 4 movies. And if you haven't been keeping up with the regular one, or if you're new here, the 4 movies that we're going to be discussing are Kicking and Screaming. And do not confuse that with the Will Ferrell soccer movie. I have to say that every time I mention this movie. It is a 1995 movie by Noah Baumbach. You've probably heard his name. He kind of had a weird career in saying that this was like his first movie onto the scene, and then doesn't really do things. And then Squid and the Whale comes out and kind of hits the ground running with once Squid and the Whale comes out. And you've probably seen Marriage Story is probably one of his most like famous movies out there. So an interesting guy who writes a lot of himself into his movies. Kicking and Screaming is no exception to that. We're going to talk about Party Girl, also a 1995 Party Girl, not to be confused with one I think that came out in the 50s or 60s. This one's starring Parker Posey. And then we have Todd Haynes' Safe and Ed Burns' The Brothers McMullen, which was the real like indie darling, and honestly is why I created this category, is because one, I had never seen The Brothers McMullen, and have wanted to for years, but it was so acclaimed at the time that I was like, I gotta throw this in and find some other ones here that fall into that same category as indie darling. So if you're out there and you're watching or listening or any of those, if you've seen any of those movies or have heard of any of those movies, let us know in the chat if you have heard or seen any of those movies. So, all right. So let's get into them. Let's talk about each of these movies a little bit. So I really never have a structure like I do with the regular one. And why didn't McMullen make the cut? That's a good question. So I think that there were 52 more movies, and this is a great question for why some of these movies don't even make the cut. Because in a couple months, I have a a theme, an extra credit theme that is 75% or more on Rotten Tomatoes. That is the theme of the extra credit month. So you're like, "Oh, those are good movies. Why wouldn't you want to watch those?" So what it comes into the criteria of me choosing the 52, I have 1 month that's set aside for the Best Picture nominations, which that guarantees me 5 movies right there. I do it, when we're going through the Oscar months and everything. And then after I choose those 5, those are set in stone. I look at the top 25 grossing films of the year. And so I look at those, and some of the times there's some overlap with the Oscars ones, but a lot of times there are not. So that could be up to 20 more movies added there. So we're already halfway when it comes to picking the 52 that I select. And then I just kind of go through it, and I try and make categories out of them. So if I have my February romance, I've done romance twice. I try and pick out, popular romantic comedies or romance movies, and I put them in there. And then I just kind of see where I'm at with some of the other movies. I usually have lists of like 150 movies that come out that are released in the United States. That's another stipulation, released in the United States. You'll see a couple of those movies here that were 94 movies but weren't released in the United States until then. So that's another thing that I am always looking for. And then some other things that people, like I said, that people are interested in, and see what is popular today. And unfortunately, like Brothers McMullen is not one that you can easily just pull and find today, and people are still talking about it. Although people are still talking about it because they're planning a sequel to it for 2020. I think they're making it this year. So maybe it should have made the list, but really it all just comes down to how it fits within my categories. If I don't see a good area for it to fit into, then I might make the extra credit list. And one of the things that I have been more intentional about with extra credit has been making them better movies. I think the last year that we did this in 94, I had a lot of duds. And that wasn't as exciting to talk about, the duds, because they're just bad movies. And so I was like, I'm going to be a little bit more intentional this year. I'm going to have some actual good movies to talk about, and still have our fun ones, and still have ones like kids movies that we're nostalgic for. So that's really how I get into it. Great question about how, one that probably gave you a little bit more detail in how I actually choose the things that I choose. So duds can be fun, but they can also really be duds. And last year, I think we it was a struggle to go through some of the ones that we did last year. And I think Ryan, who's a frequent guest on here, for watching a lot of those with me and participating in those. So appreciate him for doing that. But anyway, these movies that we're talking about all kind of fare on the positive side. I think I gave you most of the directors for them. Party Girl, I didn't give you the director for. Her name is Daisy Von Schurler Mayer. And that was another movie that I was really excited to see. Party Girl and Brothers McMullen were both ones that I was excited to see that I had not seen previously. I watched Safe at the beginning of the pandemic because it is kind of relevant in the pandemic times. And then Kicking and Screaming, I watched probably 6 years ago. It was in a weird space. And I think this time around really hit me a little bit different than what I did previously. But the ratings for all these movies are pretty high, minus Kicking and Screaming, which I'm a little surprised about. I might pull up Rotten Tomatoes and see what we're looking at there. But Kicking and Screaming came in at a 56%, which is our lowest that we have. And then Party Girl comes in at 82%. Safe and the Brothers McMullen both come in at 88%. So pretty popular movies. I think what the reason behind the kicking and screaming 56% is the kind of is the same criticism that I imagine Baumbach gets a lot. And that is going to be like a little pretentious. It's just about 20 something guys and them. It's a lot of conversation movie, and who wants to watch a movie just about 5 guys that aren't necessarily interesting and also aren't necessarily my demographic. So we can talk about Kicking and Screaming before we even get started. So this is Baumbach's feature debut. It is a dry, witty portrait of post-college drift. And it's interesting that this movie comes out, and a lot of people think of this movie as like a Gen X, it's one of those Gen X movies that we've talked about a lot. We get a lot of them. We get like a Reality Bites. We get Dazed and Confused kind of works in the same vein. But Reality Bites or Before Sunrise, those 20-something movies that are very, very, very Gen X. And weirdly enough, I think that this movie relates more to millennials than it does to Gen X. And just that, like, what are we doing and where do we go after college and what are our options? We had our dreams of doing these things, and then those things are kind of like don't exist, or there aren't jobs for those things. So it does have that Gen X-ness to it. And I would be curious with other people watching, perhaps you, what you would feel, or if you would like it, or if you'd be drawn to it. As a millennial, and I know I bring up like generations a lot, but I do think that this is very like, it just goes to that millennial dread, I guess and this is before, like you said, the eldest millennial at this point were 15 as of 1995. It is definitely interesting to look at it under that lens. It does still capture that like 1990s slacker anxiety. One of the things I like about it is it really does like, I don't know if people find this interesting, but like if you have it, especially for me as a man, and that is not whatever, we're not gonna say, but like it kind of captures that, like, oh, here's 5 guys that are talking about just nothing and also not having a plan for anything and just lounging around and fumbling their way through lives. And I could see where that is not appealing to a lot of people and where this would not be appealing to anything. And then of course, there's like a love interest storyline that is kind of pushed in there, and an incredible ending to this film. But yeah, that's pretty much like even Baumbach like puts himself in the movie. He's physically in the movie himself, talking nonsense about like which person would you rather have sex with. Like that is a conversation. Like what celebrity or what fictional figure would you rather have sex? That is like a topic of conversation that Noah Baumbach in the background is having with another character in this movie. And I don't know if that's necessarily why I like it, but that's the kind of dumb BS that guys are often talking about. And I felt like it was funny in that regard. And it was interesting in how they went through these 5 guys' lives. One of the 5 guys that I'm talking about is a guy that's actually been in college his whole life. Yes, and that is a great way to put it. Somebody, feels like a refined Clerks. Honestly, I think it falls under that same category as Clerks, and minus like weird, stupid characters or weird side plots or anything. It is a refined Clerks, or these people think they're more refined than those that are working at, a convenience store, when truly they're not at all. All these guys have graduated. There's one character, his name's Chet, who my name is named after, who is a lifelong college student, is happy doing that. He's a local bartender. He hangs out with these younger guys. He's probably, I think he's 28 in the movie. He hangs out with these younger guys, but he's not sad about anything. Chet is the only character in the movie that actually knows who he is and is completely fine with that. And he is that bartender who gives, the best wisdom, and talks to each one of our characters at different times throughout this, and is perfectly happy in his life being a bartender and being a lifelong student, because that is what makes him the happiest. And we're shown that he's wearing a wedding ring in this movie as well, and that we also find out later in the movie that he has a child. And at no points of this movie is Chet, do you ever fear for Chet or fear for his life, like for his direction in life? And Chet is the most functioning character, and he's also one of the funniest characters in this, just by the way he talks to people. It's very like sage-like advice that he is just always there to give. And Chet is just a learner and an observer of these other four guys who we are the main like people that we talk about in this movie. I will say that I was drawn to more of the a couple of the characters more than the other two. So two of them were better than the other two in my mind. Grover, which is a great name, a very old name. We don't see that name anymore. Grover and Max are the two that I was instantly drawn to. Grover is what I would say is like our lead character of the movie. He is the one we're introduced to at the beginning, him having a conversation with his girlfriend and learning that she is getting ready to go to Prague for, that's what she's doing after graduation, is she's going to a graduate program in Prague. And he's sitting there being like, Prague, I've been to Prague. And he hasn't been to Prague, but he's like, you know what I mean? Like, I've been to Prague, it's all like all these like pretentious people go to Prague, and then they'll come back and they'll say, oh, the coffee's just not as good here as it is in Prague and everything. And that's not the point of it all. Like, the girl is like, hey, I'm going to Prague. I would love for you to go with me and you not to be a complete asshole about this whole thing. And she is, saying that to him, and he's not hearing it. And he is just like, oh, why would you want to go to Prague? And so we spend the rest of the movie with Grover kind of listening to voicemails on his answering machine from his girlfriend, now ex-girlfriend, I would say, because they're not together, and him realizing the mistakes that he's made and realizing like, oh, I should be with her, but I've got to figure out my life here. And we see a series of flashbacks of him meeting this girl and coming to terms with, oh, she was, I was in love with her and I should, turn around, leading to probably the only possible ending that you could do for this movie that makes it a really, really solid ending. And then we have Max, and Max is our rich boy, typical rich boy. But I think Max is one of the funniest characters. He says he gets the best lines. Max is kind of floating though. Max is sitting there, wondering what he's going to do with his life. He is a rich boy though, so he's kind of got that safety net, but he doesn't like to acknowledge it, and he's still just hanging around in this house that mommy and daddy bought for him, and he's just not getting it. His dad even is like, hey, I've got this apartment in the city that I can, I can get rid of it. Like, it's on the Upper East Side, and it total rich guy. Who you think you shouldn't like. But Max is very endearing and very funny. And Max ends up sleeping with one of his best friend, Skippy's girlfriend, even though it didn't mean anything. Which I know sounds ridiculous, but the whole Skippy of it. Skippy is my least favorite character in this whole thing. He goes back to school. He's the character that goes back to school after graduation to try and like live that Chet life. But Skippy just doesn't get it. I find Skippy annoying and tries to be a little controlling of his girlfriend, whose name is Miami, played by Parker Posey. Skippy, I I don't get Skippy. I don't like him. His name is freaking Skippy, for God's sakes. Like, I don't like Skippy. He's not great. And then there's Otis. Otis is our fourth character. And Otis is one that has plans after, but he's scared to leave the comfort of college and leave the comfort of his friends and everything. And he doesn't want to go back home and have the job that he has already lined up and everything. So Otis is interesting in a different way. Very funny character, kind of childlike character. Of the four of them, they're all kind of just man children. Would have been a good man child entry for that whole month. So for our Boys to Men month. But yeah, no, I love Max, and Max goes through some things. He sleeps with his friend's girlfriend. He ends up this is also a place where, where I could see some people not liking it. Max is 22 years old and ends up falling for a 16-year-old girl in this movie, who's actually played by Mike and Nancy's mom from Stranger Things. So interesting there, but it's also like one of the better relationships in the movie, because she kind of brings Max out of his shell a little bit, kind of takes him down a few pegs. She's interesting. I love that character, and that actress does a really, really good job in this movie. And so that is a weird part. There's a 16-year-old with a 22-year-old, so that is the 90s. The 80s are worse at this, but the 90s, guys. Am I right? Okay. So that's really all I have to say about Kicking and Screaming until we get to kind of the final, when I run through these things. And then we get to probably one out of these four, Party Girl. Let's talk about Party Girl. I had not seen Party Girl. I have heard about Party Girl for years. Again, this movie stars Parker Posey. I've mentioned her earlier in Kicking and Screaming, playing character Miami. In this movie, it is all about her. It is a starring role. And if you've ever seen Parker Posey in anything, she kind of just has a way about her in her acting style. And two Parker Poseys. Parker Posey having a big year because of The White Lotus too. So it's a good time to get on board with Parker Posey and watch some of her stuff. And this is a movie that I like. After watching, I'm like, man, why did Parker Posey not become a much bigger deal? And not that she hasn't been a working actress her whole life, but she is so good and so funny in Party Girl that I just don't know why it didn't like make it for her. Maybe it was her mean girl energy that she puts off in the mean girl energy that she gives off in Dazed and Confused, or her weird roles that she takes in the Christopher Guest films. It could be either of those, but after watching Party Girl, I was like, no, this is so good. And thank you to new subscription out there. Thank you. It is Showtime for subscribing. We really appreciate that. We appreciate any subscriptions or anything here. It all goes back into the stream, and anything given is done to make this better. So I really appreciate that. But back to Party Girl. So this movie is about a New York City it girl who is a party planner, and she's always throwing like raves, and she's got very like fashion forward. And she has these like wild outfits in the film that just kind of show her as like a club girl. And she ends up getting thrown in jail for throwing one of these parties. And I think there was probably some charges of like underage drinking or something like that. But anyway, she has to find a job. She didn't make any money off of it. She plans parties, and the money that she makes from the parties are how she keeps her living her life. And well, she can't do that anymore. And so she has to go to her godmother to see if she will give her a job at her library. That's where her godmother works. And her godmother is very like, very straight-laced and wants her to get out of this, party atmosphere that she's stuck in, or she's going to end up like her mother. Yeah, fairy godmother, but she's like not a fun fairy godmother at all. This is interesting. But this one, so the whole movie's about this woman that Parker Posey plays, and she gets this job at this library, and she's still trying to balance her life of being in the club culture, but also she's not succeeding at her job as the library. And so she's going to lose that job unless she kind of changes her ways. So the whole time she's like learning more about library science and the Dewey Decimal System. And she's still trying to like, help her friends out. She has one friend who's a DJ that really needs her help getting him in places that can promote his music. She also meets a Lebanese food cart guy and kind of strikes up a relationship with him, and he kind of brings her down to earth a little bit more. But it's such a fun movie, and I said even in my Letterboxd review, this is a top 5 movie about library science. Because you learn so much about library. And like, that's the whole point, is that her growing through this and slowly like shedding her party girl aesthetic and becoming this librarian and falling in love with this librarian thing. But also, she's surrounded by people that love her. You see them constantly pop in and out of her life, all of her friends. So she tries to mesh the two together. It is so funny. And I recommend this movie to anybody that's never seen it. It is like the reverse of Grease. This is Danny becoming like Sandy. But if you're into a movie, like, again, this has a lot of 90s club culture, queer energy to it. There's a lot of that that comes along with the club culture. Beautiful. This movie's awesome. I cannot recommend this movie enough. If there's one thing I come away from this, like, I do not think that Kicking and Screaming is for everybody. I think that Party Girl is one that I think a lot more people will like, especially women. I think women would really be drawn to Party Girl. I think it's way better for them. So let's go over to our next one, Safe, which is, like I said, a movie that I had watched during the pandemic, and rightfully so. This movie stars Julianne Moore, and she's really giving like this sad, like not even sad, depressing performance as like the suburban housewife who develops environmental illness. I put quotes around that. But if you've ever seen Julianne Moore in a movie, and she can sometimes go like big, like this isn't even her acting like a normal person, I would say. She's just very quiet and mousy, and suburban housewife is, in that role. Like, I've never seen Moore do anything like this before, and she is superb in this. So if there's like a great act, this is not a movie that you throw on like in the middle of the night, or this one's more of a like slow burn. You're not going to get a lot of action in this movie, because the whole time she's just becoming sicker and sicker and sicker. How is it related to the pandemic? It was just a part of those movies where, she is isolating herself a lot from the world, from the outside world. And so you see her early on develop this cough because she's riding behind this dump truck or something, and she starts coughing, and then it leads to more and more symptoms. And the whole time you never know if she's making these symptoms up in her head or if it truly is some kind of thing, but she's developing actual symptoms. Like her nose bleeds, she coughs up blood, she has a seizure at one point, and every time she goes to the doctor, they're like, nothing is wrong with you. Like, you are perfectly healthy. I don't know why your nose is bleeding. I don't know why you're doing any other. Yeah, it's very psychosomatic. And she takes herself down these rabbit holes. And you see it not only with the pandemic, but you see it, with our Facebook culture and where we're getting our news and anti-vaxxing and all these things, of where she kind of loses herself a little bit. And, she ends up checking into this retreat. And this retreat seems kind of hokey. Even she thinks it's a little hokey at the beginning because they're like singing songs. It feels very cult-like or like church-like at times. And she breaks down at one point while she's there, because she's like, what have I done? This is a mistake. I should be home with my family, with my husband, my stepson. I need to be doing that. And then she kind of like lets herself be taken in by these people. By the end of the movie, she is fully enveloped in this to the point where she has isolated herself even further at this camp or this retreat setting, and she's ends up turning into one of the people that was there that was very sick from this environmental illness that ended up dying earlier in the film. So there is some like dark humor in this movie, especially it takes place in like the late 80s. So you see a lot of the like late 80s aesthetic to it, the cleanliness of that like late 80s or 80s suburban lifestyle, and how everything is very clean and white and beige or whatever it is. The color palette is very clean, I would say. And I think that this movie has more to say every time that I watch it. I've watched it twice and I feel like I got different things out of it. But it's like critiquing consumerism, it critiques suburbia, but it also like, so it's critiquing all those things of capitalism and environmentalism and conservationism and all those things that, you know, were typical. But then it also shows you criticism of the other side, that new age self-help side of it. And it kind of makes fun of them too. Is it a horror movie? I think you could probably, you know, like, I think from reviews and things that people say this is a horror-esque movie, but nothing scary ever happens. It is just a horror movie in the vein that it's about real life, or not necessarily real life, but people said it's one of the most terrifying movies of like the 1990s. I saw that come up again. And you see this person just go through this like, you don't, again, the scariest part is you don't know if she's making this up or if it really is happening to her. And both of those are scary in a way, because if it's scary, she's losing her mind and her mind is now in control of like causing all these awful things, or she has a disease that nobody knows how to fix and there's no cure for it because nobody knows how to fix it. They can't even diagnose it. So in that vein, it is a horror movie. So let's move over to our last one, which is The Brothers McMullen. And The Brothers McMullen is the one that, like I said, this is the one that caught my attention, made me want to do the indie film. So this movie is done by Ed Burns. A lot of people probably know Ed Burns. He's acted in movies that you've seen, whether it's The Holiday. He's Cameron Diaz's boyfriend at the beginning of that movie, then ex-boyfriend. He is a big part of Saving Private Ryan as one of the private that go to search for Private Ryan. He's very New York, very Long Island. And he wrote, directed, and starred in this film. And he made this movie for just $25,000. So very bare budget, micro budget. And this is actually the winner of the Grand Jury Prize at Sundance Film Festival. So that's where this indie darling thing kind of came from. This also kind of helped launch some of these 90s DIY indie, the boom that's going on here. We've seen it time and time again with Robert Rodriguez, Quentin Tarantino, Ed Burns. You see stuff like the other ones that we named. Noah Baumbach comes out of this, and Todd Haynes is really popular indie filmmaker. Soderbergh comes out of like the late 80s, early 90s. So a lot of those independent films are coming out for very cheap. But the whole purpose of this movie is that it follows three Irish-American brothers navigating love, religion, and family while they're living on Long Island. And again, this is that boy movie. But it gives you the three brothers in different periods of their life. You've got Ed Burns, who is an aspiring screenwriter. Obviously, he wrote himself into this, who doesn't believe in love, doesn't believe in marriage, doesn't want children, doesn't want that life. He wants to, you know, get his screenplays and then have sex with as many people as possible. That is the Ed Burns of it all. That is his thing. That is what he is. Of course, that doesn't always happen because he ends up meeting a girl in this and she changes his perspective. Then you have the middle brother, who is a little bit more established. He has a job and he's dating this Jewish woman, which is important. He's dating this Jewish woman and she's wanting a little bit more of committal of commitment. She wants to move in together, and this kind of freaks out that brother because he's like, oh my God, like I can't move in with you. I've got to be married. I'm Catholic. I can't just move in with you. And from that starting point, he starts going down like, oh, do I even want to be married to this girl at all? Do I even want to be attached to this girl at all? Not because she's Jewish, just if she's not the right person, because I'm still like fighting all these things. And so he goes back and forth. There is a section where he finds out that she's pregnant, and which is in his mind the worst thing that could happen to a good Catholic boy like himself, because he's having a child out of wedlock. Big no. She can't get an abortion because of Catholicism. Big no. And big, all these red flags, and he's just stressing out about it. Him and his girlfriend break up a couple times in the movie, and he ends up meeting randomly a girl from his neighborhood, a girl from his school, who he thought went on and got married, and ends up that she had, kind of a similar existential crisis when she was getting ready to get married. And she was like, I don't want this. I don't want all these things. I don't want to be with this guy. I'm a liberal now. I don't believe in any of these things. I don't believe in, Catholicism anymore. And she kind of opens his eyes to what the possibilities are. And they also strike up a relationship, which is really nice. And then we get the final brother, who is the oldest brother of them all. And he is the married brother. And he has a relationship with his wife. And then early on in this movie, we're introduced to another female character who catches his eye, and he starts to develop feelings with her because she says all the right things to him. Like, hey, I've been married before. I don't ever want to be married. This other character, I don't want to be married before. I just want to have sex with guys that are married, because they're the ones that know that like there's no stakes in the game. They don't want to get married. They just want sex, and that's it. And so he kind of gets entangled in this, and obviously, so he starts an affair, and he's cheating on his wife, played by Connie Britton, who is probably the most famous person in this movie. And then Ed Burns, I would say, comes after her. But Connie Britton is most famous for playing Coach's wife on Friday Night Lights, but has been in many, many things. Nashville, Spin City. She's done a few movies here and there. Connie Britton is great, and she's great in this movie. And she's the best actor in this movie. This is the one that I had a little trouble with, and the fact that this movie was rated at an 88% threw me for a loop, because the acting is not good in this movie by a few characters. And thank God for Connie Britton and Ed Burns as well. But Connie Britton is so good in this as a wife that is, trying, and then notices her husband becoming a little bit more distant, and trying to navigate that and determine what's going on, and see where they are in that. But everything all gets settled in the end. They all figure out their lives, and Ed Burns finds out that he loves this woman, and that he wants to marry her, and then he wants to move with her, and all these things. So that one's solved. The middle brother ends up going across the country to California with his new liberal girlfriend, which is supposed to be a big deal with him being this Catholic family. And then the older brother, who has cheated on his wife, has a confrontation with Connie Britton, and everything is great. Is the Rotten Tomatoes score heavily influenced by the acting, or maybe the plot gave it the higher score? I think that Rotten Tomatoes is just a aggregator of, is an aggregator of all the reviews that came out. A lot of those reviews came out in the 90s and everything. So when it comes to like this movie with, I think people were just impressed, again, getting a movie that is more talking, less action. It is more conversational. It kind of hits on all those things that like Kevin Smith is doing, and all these new directors are hitting on more like conversational, less plot driven movies. And I think this adds to it. But this does kind of sound like Waiting to Exhale. That's a good point. This is like the white Catholic Waiting to Exhale. Um, and I think it's probably equally as good as Waiting to Exhale too, because I think it has, just like Waiting to Exhale, I think it has flaws in the characters that it has created. And I think that there are assumptions made about all these characters. But, I feel like Ed Burns is writing from a place of where he was raised this way. He's writing about Long Island. He's writing about being Catholic. He's writing about all these things. And so it is probably closer to that. But like looking back on it after 30 years, you're like, oh, Jesus, come on, man. Like, I've seen this before. I've heard this before. So it was definitely not the thing that I like the most out of all these movies. I am glad that I've watched it. I'm glad that I could cross it off my list and be happy with it. And it captures a type of person that I have no knowledge around, I would say. So I'm glad that I got to watch that. And I know that it is well beloved, and it is. There is a planned sequel out just called The Family McMullen, not The Brothers McMullen. So we'll get to, get all these original characters back. We get to see where they're at in their time, or in their lives 30 years later. So that is exciting that exists. So I'll probably watch it because I have watched this. But out of these, if I were to rank them, I think Party Girl is probably my number one movie. Again, I think it is the most fun. I think it is the most accessible for all parties. I think it's the funniest of the three. It does have some problematic moments in it with an ex-boyfriend, but it's very brief. It's very short. Nothing like too serious happens. But other than that, like, it is the best out of these four in my mind, fun-wise especially. So can't recommend it enough. I think I'm going to rank Kicking and Screaming second on my list, and that's for me. And I do think more people should watch this, though, and because I would love to see what people's thoughts are on this. I think this movie grows on you, and it hits you at a different time, or hits you at a different point in your life, and it means something completely different. I don't know if I would have appreciated this movie right out of college like these characters are. I don't know if I would enjoy that other than the stupid conversations that they have and miss out on the other meanings that are left. There are two great moments in Kicking and Screaming. One is when Chet, the barman, tells him about like why he is the way he is. He tells our main character Grover about that. And then at the very end of the movie, when Grover decides to, get a plane ticket and go to Prague to go see his girlfriend, and he has this long speech, and it's all cut short. It's a very good scene, very good scene. And then I think Safe is up there as well. It just hits kind of a different vibe check for this. So I recommend Safe, and then Brothers McMullen pulling in the rear here. I think it probably could swap Rotten Tomatoes scores with Kicking and Screaming, just because of some of the acting and the plotting, and it does seem like a plot that we've seen time and time again, just from more annoying men than usual. So, but that's my ranking. That doesn't have to be your ranking. Would love for you all to watch these, come back and talk to us about them. And you can do so by joining us in our Discord. If you need a link, you can always click on the link below. I think there's a link tree, or there's an actual link to Discord on Twitch, where you can get in there and talk to us about these movies and any movies, to be honest. And you can also find information on our music podcast there, our regular 52/1995 podcast for the movies of 1995. You can get on there and talk to us about that, or just talk about anything. We've got recipes on there, sports on there. Would love for people to join us and talk more about this with it. And if today is something that interests you, even though I'm solo today and not as interesting or having that conversation, I said this was a conversation podcast. I'm just talking to myself right now. But if you find this interesting and you want to watch more, check us out. We've got, some of these are saved on YouTube, check us out there. Add us, join us every week. You can participate. As you can see, I've been talking with the chat the whole time, and you can talk to us about what you've been watching and what we're watching, and join along with us. We'd love to have you. So definitely follow along, and if you like it, hang out a bit longer. So now, as a closing for this, we are going to jump into our next month because we do these on a monthly basis for these extra credit ones. And like I kind of already prefaced earlier, we're going to be doing a Just for Kids month of all these kids movies that came out in 1995. So I think you'll be able to watch a lot of these. I think a lot of these are going to be on Disney Plus. So next month, July 30th, I believe that's good. That's the last Wednesday of the month. We're going to be doing Just for Kids. And the 4 movies that we're going to be talking about are Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, the movie, The Big Green, A Kid in King Arthur's Court, and the movie Tall Tale. If you don't know what Tall Tale is, I think it might have like a colon, something else to it. But it's about like Paul Bunyan and John Henry and Pecos Bill. It's an old movie. I mean, obviously these are all 30-year-old movies, but Tall Tale, it's about a kid who encounters all these people. It's called, what is it called? Let's see if it has a, also known as Tall Tale, The Unbelievable Adventures of Pecos Bill, and a 1995 American Western adventure fantasy film. So I remember loving this movie as a child, and I can't wait to watch it and see how terrible it is now. It didn't do too hot in the theaters, but this is one of those weird Disney movies that came out in the 90s. So if you ever forget those, again, we'll have those in Discord. If you need a link to those extra credit movies, I've got a link of all the movies. You can get on our Letterboxd. You can find that extra credit list there as well, and you can find our regular list there as well. So add me across all platforms. I dare you. But other than that, I think we're going to close out the show. Reminder, we missed out on Sunday's broadcast of 52/1995. So we'll be doing that tomorrow at 6 p.m. We're going to be discussing GoldenEye, the first James Bond movie of the night of the 52-universe for us. So I look forward to talking about that one tomorrow. And then on Sunday, or not Sunday, sorry, Monday, we'll be doing Desperado, the sequel to El Mariachi, another movie that we've done. We'll be doing that on Monday at 6 p.m., I believe. So make sure to look at our Instagram, or if you have questions in our Discord, you can send me a message and I can tell you when we're going to be broadcasting that. But usually our Instagram feed keeps up with when we're actually going to be doing that. So we'll be doing Desperado this coming Sunday. So if you need to watch that now, get it out of the way, or Monday, I should say. Get that out of the way and join us then. So stop with your F, marry, kill. Stop it. You're in trouble, both of you. Stop it. That's it. All right. We're out of here. I'll talk to you next time. See you next month for extra credit. You guys are the best. Thanks for all the subscriptions, the follows, and we'll see you next time here on 52/1995.
What a year, what a time. Big screens, dreams, a movie rewind. From talking toys to heists gone wrong. We're watching it live and singing along. 52/1995. Grab some snacks, we're going live. Action, drama, comedy, gold. We're reliving the stories told.
One movie a week,
all year long. Let's roll the tape.